this is lesson 1-3, coordinate plane and slope. And this, I think, is going to be very familiar to you because it's just reviewing some concepts from Algebra 1 that we should know. And so we're just going to recap them, make sure we're all on the same page. So I can describe the anatomy of a coordinate plane. I can plot points. I can calculate slope, given a variety of information. Those are the two things we're looking at today. So just some real basics here. So coordinate plane, hopefully you remember, has an x-axis and a y-axis. So the x-axis is horizontal and the y-axis is vertical. And then the origin is that point at the very middle of the graph, right? So that's our origin right there. And then the x-intercepts would be anywhere that a line crosses the x-axis. So here we've got a green line on the drawing. And you can see it intersects the x-axis right there. And that point would be 2 to the left and then up or down 0. So I would write -2, 0 for that point. And the y-intercept is just the point where it crosses the y-axis. So that would be that point right there. So that looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd say that's -4, right? So that's left or right 0, and then down to -4. And then quadrants. Notice for the coordinate plane, think of the coordinate plane like this, the capital C. Actually, the capital C runs through the quadrants from 1 through 4 in order if you write that letter C. So upper right is quadrant 1, upper left is quadrant 2, lower left is quadrant 3, and lower right is quadrant 4. And they often use these Roman numerals that you see written there. And then plotting a point, just remember that the first coordinate, like 3, -2, the first coordinate is the x, the second coordinate is the y. And so for 3, -2, I'm going to go right 3, and then I'm going to go down 2. So if I count over right 3 and down 2, there's the point 3, -2, and I might call it point P. So I'll just put a P right there next to it. So hopefully you remember all that. That shouldn't be anything new to you. Let's move on then and talk about slope. The slope is just the change in the y value of a line or a table or whatever format we're looking at, divided by the change in the x values in that format. So the formula can be written like this, where m indicates slope. So slope is indicated by this lowercase m, kind of a script m, is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Well, that's if you're given 2 points, and we would call one x1, y1, and the other point would be x2, y2. That indicates 2 different points. A little subscript gives you the difference between the points, these 2 here being a 1 and these 2 over here being a 2. And so you would just fill the values into the correct spots there in that formula. And then you would do your calculation. Here, I've got to pause for just a second. All right, sorry about that. So in equations, we find slope as well. And hopefully you recognize these 2 forms. The first one is called the slope-intercept form. And so you can see m right there. It's the value, it's the coefficient with x. It's the value in front of x is the slope. And then the second one is called point slope form. Because in point slope form, we see the slope is m again, but it also gives us an ordered pair x1, y1. That's a point that's on the line, and then m is the slope, or how the line moves or changes from point to point. And up here in the slope-intercept form, the b value gives us the y-intercept, and that can tell us where we can start on the graph on the y-axis, and then m tells us how to move or how the points on that line change. So there's that formula. That should not be new to you, that formula for slope. The equation forms there. Hopefully slope-intercept form is familiar to you. Maybe you didn't learn point slope, but we'll talk a little more about that as we go on here. So looking at these, all this different information I'm giving you here, I've given you two different equations. I've given you a pair of points. I've given you a description of 10 degrees over 2 hours. I gave you a graph and I gave you a table. And you can identify slope in every single one of these using one of the things on the previous page. So if we look at the first equation given here, it is slope-intercept form. So this is the y equals mx plus b. So the slope is that m, it's that 3 right there in front of x. Okay? The second equation is that point slope form that I showed you. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And what's in place of the m right there is this negative 1/2. So that's the slope. So we could write m equals negative 1/2. For this we could write m equals 3. Well, here's a pair of points, and I'm going to need to run the little formula. So I'm going to put that formula down here. So slope, like this. So I like to set my formula up by just leaving out the x's and y's and just drawing a fraction bar and then two subtraction signs, one on top and one on bottom. And so the first value is y2. If you remember the formula here, I'll write it right up here so we can remember. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So y2 would be this right here. This would be x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is y2. So y2 is 3, and y1 is also, well, negative 8, sorry, is negative 8. Then on the bottom, x2 is 3, and x1 is 2. Now, anytime you have minus and a negative together, they make a plus sign. So 3 plus 8 is 11, and 3 minus 2 is 1. So it sounds like the slope here is just 11. So 10 degrees over 2 hours. Well, think about time is always on the x-axis. So the x's here are the 2, and the y's here are the 10. And these represent changes, like over 2 hours means the time has changed 2 hours. So that's change in x, which goes on the bottom, and then change in y, which is the 10, it goes on the top. So this would be equal to 5. So the slope there is 5. This graph over here, I need to find a couple of really good points to use that pass through the corners of the grid. So I'm going to choose the y-intercept here and the x-intercept there. The graph clearly goes through the corners of the grid. And I'm going to count it. It's changing in the y values, how far up or down. Well, this line moves upward 1, 2, 3 units. As it moves right, 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So I could say the slope here is the change in y is up 3, and the change in x is right 4. And then in this graph here, this table, I'm just going to figure out the change in the x and the change in the y. So the x's go from 3 to 5. That's going up 2. And notice that's consistent. It goes up 2 again. And then negative 7 to negative 10 is a drop of 3, and negative 10 to negative 13 would also be a drop of 3. So the slope here is change in y, which is a drop of 3, over change in x, which is up 2. And that's my slope. So lots of ways that we should understand how to find the slope of something, or the rate of change. It's an important concept. So you're going to find in IXL, and I've starred these for you as well, go to the Algebra 1 tab on IXL, go to I1, and there's a coordinate plane review there. And then back on the Geometry tab, E1, slope of lines, and try and score a 90 and an 80 on those SMART scores.